What's up? I would like to fix microphone audio, maybe the capture card audio a little bit. Let's bring that to -35. All right, cool. Cool. Post that onto the Discord. Sick. All right. Twitch, what is Twitch doing? Twitch is being Twitch. Not much I can do about that. Okay. I'm going to start getting set up here so I can have this going basically at a moment's notice. All right, let's minimize that. Let's minimize this. Okay. Now you may notice the camera is in the top right. Channel veterans know what this means. This is going to be a React Andy oriented live stream. There were two things that I wanted to react to. One of them was suggested by somebody in the Discord. It's about voting. And one of them was something that I saw that was so... It almost defies description and comprehension to a certain extent. And I felt like it was my duty to share it with the world. Not really, it was not my duty, but I wanted to share it with the world. And by that I mean my live stream. Because it's funny. And I did not pre-watch either of these. I saw about a minute, like 1 minute of both of these respectively. So I've seen like a little bit at the beginning, but I have not watched the full videos. What we're going to start with is something that I believe to be absolutely hysterical and requires my full attention because we're about to enter Peronist territory. What is up, Bolshevik Alert Nation? What is up with it? Welcome back to stream. Alright, I'm going to select my character vehicle combo, as usual, me mock bike, and then go for it. Okay, I'm going to pull this up. And then where is the React Andy thing? There it is. Okay. Now, you guys see this man? You know who this is. This is Richard Spencer, a very well-known white supremacist in the United States and from the United States. There's a very infamous neo-Nazi rally. Boo, well, hold on, because we're about to see some fucking content from this man. So, he is known for having a very infamous rally, you know, in position of leadership, where he said on stage, "Hail Trump, hail our people, hail victory," referring to white people, and then the crowd erupted in cheers and did Nazi salutes because they were neo-Nazis, right? Since then, since Trump got elected, Richard Spencer kind of fell out of the light of the public discourse. And in 2020, he did the unthinkable and voted for Joe Biden on the justification that Joe Biden was better for the advancement of the white race than Donald Trump. I'm not joking, and it's going to sound weird, but he's correct. In this sole respect, this is a W on his part, and wouldn't you know it, just today, or actually yesterday, 9:42 p.m., November 1st, so this would be last night, he tweeted this video. "Why I'm voting for Kamala Harris." That's right. A white supremacist is voting for Kamala Harris. Yeah, it is the most plot twist of all time. And I think this will present an opportunity for me to sort of explore that seeming contradiction that actually makes him the only consistent white supremacist. Or I guess he might call himself a white identitarian. General Hux vibes. Maybe. We'll see. Let's start with the video.
Hi everyone, this is Richard. Well, election day is coming up.
Let me know if it's too quiet. I'm gonna turn this up a little bit to -20. Wait, no, it was at -20. -19.
And I want you all to know that I'm voting for Kamala Harris, and I hope you will too. Now, I hesitate to even say this, but I feel like I probably should. No, this is not some sort of troll or joke. This is a sincere vote.
He's not trolling. And he's aware that, like, yeah, we do a lot of trolling as neo-Nazis. He was one of the vanguards of that in 2016, 17.
Funny once or twice, but you run into the boy who cried wolf situation, and no one takes you seriously after that. And I do want you to take my word.
Remember this funny lad? Yeah.
For me, voting is that 1/300 millionth little piece of national power that you possess. And for me, it's a...
Again, I might get into some hot water for this, but he's correct. But, like, it sounds weird for a white supremacist to be saying something correct. But yeah, voting is just a tiny piece of what people can do or should do in their engagement with politics. It more so, the reason I think I'm gonna get in hot water is because, like, it just sounds very weird for somebody to agree with somebody who is a professed white supremacist or white identitarian, I guess Richard Spencer would call himself. But in this instance, it's not because, like, it's not because of the whole, oh, why I left the left shtick. It's because for some fucking reason, Richard Spencer, instead of, like, me moving right, Richard Spencer has, like, compared to the rest of the white supremacist bloc, he has moved left, if that makes sense. Incredibly bizarre turn of events.
Sort of Hobbesian calculation, you could say.
Oops.
It is voting for the person who best offers stability, safety, continuation, and is most likely to be the best manager of the American empire. And when
Interesting.
I look that way, the choice is very clear. I think Donald Trump and the MAGA movement bring nothing but stupidity and chaos.
Okay. This is interesting framing right away. I did not expect him to take this route. That, oh yeah, when you vote for president, fundamentally what you're doing is voting for a steward of empire, the US being an imperial organ on the world stage, and Kamala Harris is a better steward to that effect than Donald Trump is. And again, I'm inclined to agree with this argument because it's informed largely, I think, by materialism, right? Like, the United States is a very powerful country, and if you're approaching this purely from the perspective of who is more competent at managing such a large country with such widespread and imperial influence, then the choice is clearly Kamala Harris, because Donald Trump's plan, Project 2025, calls for the installation of fascist loyalists into the administrative state and the gutting of that state, which is sure to produce disastrous consequences. Kamala Harris would not do that. You know, the business as usual, as distasteful as most people find it, is preferable to a bunch of fascists running around, like, shitting themselves in government, trying to figure out how to best persecute, like, the 2 trans kids that exist in the state of Ohio. Parentheses. Yeah.
Am I a liberal or a centrist in my heart of hearts? No. But again...
Okay, well, he's being honest to that effect. Honestly, I think that Richard Spencer, as weird as it sounds, I think that, despite him saying this, I think the closest ideology that you could pin to him is liberalism, right? And the reason I say that, number one, is because he has a more materialist worldview than, you know, other fascists, you know. I get the argument. Yeah, and really what I think is going on, like the reason I say that he is way more of a liberal than the other fascists is that white supremacists don't actually care about the stability of like, I don't know. They don't care about the white race in a materialist sense, right? Like this, Richard Spencer's political thinking here is being informed by who is the best to ensure a continuing stability of the country such that the white race may actually prosper. Even if, you know, if it helps minorities and whatnot, that, you know, that's all well and good if it also helps the white race, like, right? Like he's viewing this from a positive lens. But for the most part, other fascists, yeah, he's being pragmatic, which fascism is actually allergic to as an ideology. This makes Richard Spencer probably the only liberal white supremacist as opposed to fascist white supremacist, because the fascist white supremacists are not interested in the sort of material advancement of the white race and its material protection and prosperity so much as they are interested in the suppression of other races, right? Even if something negatively impacts the white race, then white supremacists and neo-Nazis on a broad level will be perfectly fine with it if it hurts black or brown people, right? Like, surely we've all noticed this. You know, the United States being a sort of emblem of white hegemony in a certain way, you would want it to be stable, or even just from the perspective of like it being a super huge country, you'd want it to be stable. But like a lot of white supremacists advocate things that would like blatantly destabilize and ruin the United States, knowing how ruinous those policies would be just because they hurt brown people, you know? Their hatred of migrants and the inferior races is all driving. It is founded on insecurity and the irrational need to seek some sort of illusory reprieve from that. Whereas, as you said, Richard Spencer actually is being pragmatic. So he sort of, his comparatively more introspective analysis leads him to more materially beneficial conclusions than other white supremacists. He is truly the white race's strongest warrior, which is a hilarious sentence. Yeah, the only true white supremacist that actually cares about white people rather than most of them who care about people who are exactly like them in every aspect, if that makes sense. Yeah, most white supremacists want to just hurt others. Yeah, there's this contradiction where if you are, like, he is the only logical white supremacist, where he believes in, you know, he wants the white race to be advanced in their interest, right? That's kind of implied in a way, you would think, by the name white supremacist. Oh, the white race above all else, right? But again, he's the only one that really thinks like this. You know, because a lot of things that would be good for white people as a demographic would also be good for a lot of other racial demographics, because politics, when viewed through a materialist lens, things really, you know, they start breaking down along class lines, not along racial lines as much. Gotron, hello, welcome back to stream. We're doing a very spicy segment today. This is a video of Richard Spencer endorsing Kamala Harris for president. The most famous American white supremacist of the modern day has endorsed Kamala Harris over Donald Trump in the presidential race. And this dropped just last night. Yeah, Richard Spencer is the I want to bring whites to greatness, and Trump is the I want to tear down the non-whites, which will inevitably also hurt white Americans. I can never understand people. Oddly enough, Richard Spencer is the only, like, comprehensible, logical white supremacist here. I've explained that, like, his view, again, is to build up the white race. And in order to do that, you have to take a material lens to analyze politics. And that has led him to the conclusion that Democrats, or at least Kamala Harris, would be a better steward of the United States and would be more beneficial for white America than Donald Trump, because a lot of Donald Trump's policies and plans most of them, I presume, having to do with Project 2025, I don't know if he mentions that, would be ruinous. You know, Trump to Richard Spencer is bad because he would hurt the white race. And Kamala Harris to him is preferable because she would be less hurtful or more helpful to the white race, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's like the reverse of the far-right pipeline. The fucking Richard Spencer, like, white supremacist to left liberal fucking ideology pipeline. We may have genuinely achieved the funniest possible timeline. Lucky for us, I guess, is what you get when you have their ideology, you don't have hate. Yeah, and the thing is, he's getting torn apart by other white supremacists for this. He's getting torn apart by other, like, Twitter Nazis for this, because other Twitter Nazis and white supremacists are white supremacists in the irrational sense. White supremacy and fascism are irrational ideologies. And that largely motivates people to, instead of wanting to build up society for the benefit of the white race, and it's fine that other races are included too, they are solely interested in the harming of the other inferior races. And to them, that it is acceptable if the white race suffers so long as inferior races also suffer. Does that make sense? You know, it's a rational materialist versus like an irrational, like spiritualist and like insecurity laden ideology. Yeah, the ideology of hate. As weird as it sounds, like, it seems like the hateful part of Richard Spencer is kind of vestigial to his political viewpoints. I'm sure he still holds a lot of like blatantly white supremacist beliefs. You know, but that is a contradiction between the way he thinks and the way he acts, I think.
Again, I don't think voting is really an expression of your heart of hearts, what you truly believe in and desire.
Again, true.
I think it is a calculation. It's a sort of ratio of the least.
Ratio?
I don't want to diminish
Twitter moment.
my endorsement as well, but that is how I think about it. So, a couple of weeks ago, there were some Democratic door knockers who came to my place, and I spoke with them for just a little bit, and I told them that I was going to vote for Kamala Harris, and I was going to vote straight Democrats.
That is... Wait, okay. That's even funnier. Hold on.
And local Democrats whose names I've forgotten, but whom I will happily vote for.
Hold the fucking phone. He's not just voting for Kamala Harris. He's voting straight Democratic ticket. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Strasserist. Bro. That's kind of crazy. What a fucking individual. That's funny as hell. Yeah, he basically laid out the rational argument that, like, look, voting is an expression of power, not an expression of, like, moral virtue and sentiment, right? So I'm voting, and then he says, so I'm voting straight Democratic ticket because that is, like, at least somewhat or slightly preferable to a Republican ticket. And the underlying logic is that, like, yeah, the Republican Party and Donald Trump are bad for the advancement of the white race and you know, white society and white culture and whatnot. They would destroy that. And then, like, the Democrats are better for the, again, the uplifting of like, white race and culture or whatever. Yeah, the pure logical answer is to vote blue. Yeah, he has actual principles, which is one of the most bizarre things to see from a white supremacist. You know? Like I said, he might be the only liberal white supremacist as opposed to a fascist white supremacist, because fascist white supremacists much more common and like predictable in the sense that, you know, their irrational ideology always leads them to, like, shift the goalposts when they are presented with logical arguments, because for them it is about the sentiment that they hate non-white people. Is it funny that we're happy that someone has standards? Funny in a grim sort of way, yes. There is a very large... it's a sort of political economy of grift right now, where a lot of people, especially on the right, you know, everybody's just a grifter. And then it's rare to find somebody with political principles that are very consistent. It's even more rare to find somebody who is, of all things, a fucking white supremacist with consistent political principles.
What is your number one issue? And I said my number one issue is not to abandon Ukraine, to keep the faith in that effort, and to support Ukraine in its war against
Interesting.
Russia. And they were a little bit taken aback. They said I was the first one to say that. I bet they got a lot of abortion. Maybe they got some Trump personality things. This guy's a maniac or an imbecile. I don't know.
Yeah, that tracks.
Actually, but they did say that I was the first one to say that Ukraine is my number one issue, and it is.
I think I know why he's going to say that, but I want to comment on something.
When we think about Trump or Harris, it's a little bit murky from one perspective. Looking at Trump's own bombastic personality, you could argue that he...
Okay. So I want to comment on the sort of issues that you would expect to find as a canvasser or door knocker for the Democratic Party. Yeah, I can attest to this from my own phone banking experience, both with the Democratic Party and as a, you know, with non-affiliated organizations, that it is very common for people to just say, oh yeah, Trump is boorish and mean and I don't like him, who are like more sympathetic to Democrats. And it is also very common for people to be motivated by abortion. It is incredibly uncommon in the American political discourse, in common political discourse, to be motivated by a foreign policy issue like Ukraine, right? Like, Americans don't have the greatest awareness of foreign policy because that isn't frequently talked about in the discourse, you know? And I think I know why he is in favor of defending Ukraine as well, if I might take a stab at it. Again, I haven't seen this video. I don't know what he's going to say. But for somebody like me, supporting Ukraine is important because you want to be able to curb the advances of a fascist dictatorship wherever they are made. Basically, if Russia is able to wage a war in Eastern Europe without having severe enough consequences to deter them from so doing, then it's almost like a more straightforward form of appeasement, where instead of asking, they just sort of invade willy-nilly, right? What do you mean, foreign policy? The U.S. is the only country in the world? I mean, we are the most important. But, like, for me, it's an issue of, okay, Ukraine represents, like, not fascism, and Russia is a very big material benefactor and advancer of fascism as an ideology, and I think that should be stopped, because I would rather not have fascism. You know, democracy's pretty good, I think. For Richard Spencer, I think what he might... What I imagine he frames the issue as is that Ukraine is a white nation and part of the Western civilization fold. They've been like more and more incorporated into the diplomatic and economic sort of proximity of Europe in recent years. That's kind of what motivated Russia to invade in the first place. So to him, it's like Russians are barbarians. Nazis very well known for being pretty racist against Slavs, and basically the Slavs are breaking down the gate. Never mind the fact that, you know, Ukrainians are also Slavic, you know, they speak Slavic language and whatnot. But again, it's this weird, like, it's this weird contradiction and mishmash of white supremacy with a more rationally motivated ideology for like, I don't fucking know, dude. It's like he has taken a very, like, almost incomprehensible route to arrive at the conclusion, yeah, Russia's invading Ukraine, and that's bad. and we should continue supporting Ukraine. A pretty standard and unambiguously agreeable political position, you know, for the most part. Once I hit a straightaway, I'm gonna.
You would wage war against Putin
There we go.
more ferociously. Interestingly, it was actually Trump who first offered lethal aid to Ukraine. That was something that Obama did not want to do. So the case.
I don't know if that's
really
actually
murky,
true.
but here's how I look at it. If you address Trump's explicit statements on Ukraine, it's simply nonsensical bombast. This never would have happened. Whatever. If you address the people surrounding him, the people really enthusiastic about his campaign, I'm thinking of Elon Musk, David Sachs, J.D. Vance. All of them, to various degrees, have an express desire to sell out Ukraine, and Trump apparently owes them something. Maybe he'll turn on them, who knows? But I can only address the situation objectively and rationally. And I think there is a high probability that Trump, that is, will sell out Ukraine. I think there is a much lower possibility of that happening with Kamala Harris. She owns the war, being that it started under the Biden administration. I think. Okay.
So far, so comprehensible, right? Like this is like pretty consistent with what I said earlier, and what people in chat have been picking up on. Like, yeah, this man might actually be the only rational white supremacist on fucking planet Earth, because he's saying like, okay, the actions of Trump's inner circle, like, Ukraine is my #1 issue. I want America to keep supporting Ukraine because, like, Russia's invading and whatnot. And the actions of Trump's inner circle and his political campaign indicate that Ukraine's future would be very uncertain. Like, Russia might be able to just kind of do what it wants if Trump were to get in office, due to either Trump himself or I actually agree that it's more up to the whims of people around Trump, because Trump is pretty vacuous in and of himself. Meanwhile, the Democrats have been much more consistent on saying, like, yeah, we will continue to support Ukraine because they're our ally. Okay. Pretty basic, pretty comprehensible.
She, in many ways,
although, again, I do think that the reason that Ukraine is his #1 issue is because of, like, the barbarians at the gate kind of rhetoric, which I don't agree with. But it is what it is. Let us be content to be very amused and confused by the support to Kamala Harris being offered by one of the most famous white supremacists in America.
Represents a sort of centrist politics of the State Department. And I am more than willing to put my faith in her to continue to prosecute the war, to continue to support Ukraine.
I think part of it is explainable by him not being a Putin-aligned white supremacist. Yeah, that's true. This guy was a known supreme back in 2010, whereas a lot of the white supremacists around now date back to the mid-2010s and are backed by the Kremlin. You know what? You might have a point there. A lot of it is true that the Kremlin, like I said, Russia is a very active supporter of fascism on a global level. So a lot of neo-Nazi movements that have, especially more recently, like you said, in the 2010s, and more recently, have connections to the Kremlin and will have very pro-Putin and pro-Russia components of their ideology. Richard Spencer probably predates that, or at least comes in an early enough phase of, like, neo-Nazism in the late 20th and early 21st century that the Kremlin would not have been actively supporting it enough to affect everybody, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think there is something to that. because there are white supremacists fighting on both sides of the war in Ukraine. Obviously, you know, Russia is in multiple different dimensions. Russia is a white supremacist, you know, fascist state. There's a lot of ethnic suppression that goes on within Russia, and there's a lot of, like, most of the movements, political movements that are active in Russia right now have a very overt white supremacist bend to them. But at the same time, you know, in Ukraine, there's stuff like the Azov Battalion that is a favorite to bring up of the pro-Russia camp that, like, yeah, you know, there are Nazis in the Ukrainian military. No country is free of Nazism and white supremacy. And I don't know, I guess it is interesting that he falls on the more like, okay, I'm aligned with Ukraine more so in this situation rather than Russia, when both have elements of white supremacy within them. Although, you know, obviously I would argue that Russia is a much more white supremacist state than Ukraine is, again, from the perspective not of uplifting the white race, but of harming other races, you know?
And to do anything and everything other than sell it out to Russia. In terms of other geopolitical issues,
the harming the other races thing is a Kremlin brand of white supremacy. That's the thing. It's not just the Kremlin brand of white supremacy. That's what white supremacy overwhelmingly looks like. You can look at white supremacy in Germany. You can look at fascism in Italy. You can take a look at the language that is used to justify genocides all throughout history of various tribes and ethnic groups. And it is always not about uplifting what they view to be the true chosen group. It's all about hurting the outgroup. Funny thing about all those ideologies, they require hate to work. Yeah, and that's why I chose to react to this, is because they're so singular and different. This is it is rational in a way that I believe defies the ideology of ethnic supremacy. You know? Like, nobody's going to argue that the Nazis were particularly good at steering German economic policy in a way that benefited what they viewed to be the superior Aryan race, right? Like, the Nazi mismanagement of Germany is historic in its proportions, and the only reason that Germany held together in World War II the way it did is because of the Blitzkrieg and literally plundering all of the areas that they invaded. Do you think he's fixable? Yes. As strange as that sounds, I know I'm like, oh, I could fix him. It's not, it's like, I don't even want to do the whole I can fix him bit, but clearly this, like, Richard Spencer is motivated by a more rational set of political beliefs than actually most people. And I think him, like, voting for Democrats already puts him in a much better place. Like, the fact that he's using a lens of political analysis to try to uplift society, which results in him, at the very least, supporting liberals in contrast to other fascists, puts him above the right, even in the contingents that are not openly white supremacists. Does that make sense? Like, he's already cleared a number of bars politically, which, again, is part of what makes this so bizarre, is because he is a professed white, well, I guess he uses the term white identitarian, but he is a white supremacist. But he's sort of, it's almost like he has more so grafted a white supremacist skin over... Yes, this will be a segment. It's almost like Richard Spencer has sort of grafted the skin and aesthetic of white supremacy over what is otherwise a somewhat rational political worldview. You know, because like I said, the nature of white supremacy and ethnic supremacy as an ideology almost makes it incompatible with rational political thought. You know, because the point is, like, the point is that they, like, They just hate the other races, you know? This is almost like it's the liberal vision of what a white supremacist is. This is what a lot of liberals would actually get wrong about white supremacists, that they would assume that they're all like Richard Spencer and are just looking for an optimal way to uplift the white race and like passively don't care about other races, you know? But most of them are irrational. Makes you wonder how Nazis' black shirts would vote. Maybe they see Trump as a complete moron and sell out to Russia. No, it actually does not make me wonder that, because we don't need that historical comparison. There are real Nazis today in America. There are fascists and, you know, people with the swastika and the double lightning in their profile on social media and whatever in America, and they are voting for Trump. The Nazis in Germany were sort of racist against Slavs because that was the chosen, like, migrant outgroup. The migrant outgroup in America is like Arabs and people from Latin America. The ideologies at play in Nazi Germany and in America among the conservative population, those ideologies are one and the same. We don't have to wonder because we know.
Let's talk about the big one, Israel and Gaza. We have always been given a choice between various degrees of enthusiastic Zionism.
Oh?
Kamala wants to have her cake and eat it too, or she wants to have it both ways.
Is he gonna...
At the DNC, she said that she 100% supports Israel. She'll give Israel lethal aid. She also said that the suffering is tremendous, and she also said that Palestinians deserve their own state, their own sovereignty, that they need to have a government.
That is true. Kamala Harris has made some pretty contradictory statements over the past few months.
Side by side with Israel. So she kind of said it all. She's trying to be all things to all people. I have criticisms of that, but nevertheless, I find that better than Donald Trump. And what we know...
Holy shit, an agreeable take? Possibly?
Donald Trump has said some things like, well, he should get the war over with quickly or something like that. That almost seems like an instigation for Bibi to bomb children harder and harder.
Is he gonna...
That Trump
oh my god.
Anti-war candidate, I think, is ridiculous. And if there is
I want to let him finish this take.
Between Israel and Iran, Trump seems much more likely to not only support Israel in this, but take part in it, start bombing Iranian nuclear facilities, as he said.
Okay, hold on. I need to get to it straight away. Okay, this is perfect.
It is much more accurate to say that Donald Trump is the World War III candidate in terms of a war in the Middle East than it is to say that he's the anti-war candidate. In fact,
holy shit, okay, yeah, an agreeable take from fucking Richard Spencer on Israel and Gaza. Like, obviously, you know, you could argue that this was predictable enough that he would be anti-Zionist because white supremacists also, you know, they hate Jews, and whatnot. But, like, the fact that he didn't bring up at all the like, Jewish identity component of this and simply referred to the sort of ideological contradictions in both Harris and Trump and like, that Netanyahu is bombing children, what he argued was that, yeah, Trump would destabilize the Middle East. Again, presumably, this is consistent with him, like, believing that, oh, we want to do all we can to uplift the white race. And yeah, you know, if regional war broke out in the Middle East, I guess, you know, that wouldn't be terribly good for anybody, including the white race. So again, he's applying a rational lens of politics to his decision making here. Ow. Is he one of those white supremacists who starts having a stop clock moment regarding Israel because of anti-Semitism? That's the thing. I almost don't think he's a stopped clock. I think he's like drifting further away from the irrationality of white supremacism, which is very interesting. It, like, genuinely, I think there needs to be a psychologist or a sociologist. Like, this guy presents an amazing case study for something. I don't know what, because like, the rationality that he's approaching politics with is so full of contradictions when he also is a white identitarian, air quotes, parentheses, white supremacist, that I legitimately, I'm less and less certain what to make of this. You know? I'm sure if he elaborated further, the anti-Semitism would come to the surface. But what he led with, what is clearly a larger concern to him, what he saw more fit to include, is that Israel, more than anything, is a destabilizing force, and that they risk broader regional war in the Middle East. Which, again, you go back to his worldview, is not good for the white race. You know? Truly befuddling in how ethically consistent and reliably, like, it's truly befuddling in how ethically consistent it is, and how reliably it actually leads to preferable political action and like conclusions. Yeah, the only white supremacist to ever live that A, doesn't want war, and B, wants to uplift the white race rather than just like fuck over all of the inferior races, you know? You know, it goes back to that question, like, oh, can he be fixed? The more time goes on with this, the more I think that he might eventually, like, fix himself. You know? I need an item. What a truly bizarre case study. Again, I'm truly befuddled by this. Initially, I thought I would be able to comprehend it, but, like, genuinely, as time goes on, I think I'm understanding it less and less, because on the one hand, he's clearly, all of the arguments that he's making are informed by a rational and materialist worldview, but then on the other hand, he identifies openly with an ideology that should be inherently irrational, you know, that is based solely on hate, and is okay with the suffering of the in-group so long as it also hurts the out-group, you know? It's a contradiction that I don't know if I can really wrap my head around it. I don't even know how such a contradiction would arise, you know? Ow. Yeah, sorry. I need an item really bad. Okay. Get me up there, please. Okay.
J.D. Vance himself expressed explicitly the idea is to sell out Ukraine, forget about Europe, so that we can focus on Israel. I don't like that. I'm not going to support that.
See, again, he cares about supporting Europe as an economic bloc because it's like they're white, right? And this is, I guess this could be an example of, like, him being motivated by positive outcomes for the group he views to be superior rather than strictly by negative outcomes for the group he views to be inferior, right?
I'll get back.
And by the way, J.D. Vance being a fascist of the 2010s and even going into the early 2020s, yes, you know, J.D. Vance has connections to the Kremlin, as do many people in the Republican Party.
A little bit to this notion of what voting really means. I've suggested that it's a sort of Hobbesian calculation. For me, the Democrats are the natural party of government. The Democrats are, particularly if they have hegemonic control, the Democrats are much more likely to put forward serious policy initiatives. Republicans, they are a naysaying party. Perhaps you could say they're an almost nihilistic party. They want to yell no.
You could say that.
They want to accuse their enemies of being crazy pedophiles or demons or whatever, and they have no real policy ideas to speak of. Populism in this way becomes
is true.
It's not just a culture war, but it's a kind of culture in itself. Populism is about wearing Trump gear. It's about being loud and stupid and yelling at people and idolizing this reality show star. That's what populism is.
Oddly based takes. The populism bit I don't agree very much with. I think populism contextually can be a very good thing politically, but it is consistent. What's important and what continues to confuse me and surprise me is that he is consistent in his assessment here. Populism, this is, I think, evidence to me that I guess I was correct in saying that the closest ideology that I could ascribe to him is liberalism, because he is making arguments about good governance and being a competent steward of the state in a way that will sort of ensure stability and not lead to, like, massive economic collapse, right? Like, liberals very frequently invoke the argument of good governance, but then he also mentioned that the dangers of populism, something that liberals routinely engage with as well. He likes good governance. He doesn't like populism. He likes common sense policy. If you remove the part about him being a white identitarian, he basically just sounds like a very well-read liberal. Right? Referring to the Hobbesian calculation of who would be better stewards of the state and who would bring better stability for the citizens. Right?
Populism actually meant something in the 1890s. Populism means something when we're talking about candidates like Ross Perot or Pat Buchanan or Bernie Sanders or something. With Trump, populism means nothing outside.
Bro, he's a Bernie. I'm losing my mind. What is going on?
And you know, I was one who put a little hope in that. You know, I put hope in Trump being a sort of chaos candidate and opening things up. And
yeah. So he's acknowledging that there's a legitimate dimension to populism. Who did he use as an example? Bernie Sanders, a Jewish socialist, who I think is based, right? But, you know, all of our preconceptions, all of the historical evidence that constructs a picture for us of the ideologies of white supremacy and fascism would lead us to believe that there would be nothing that the fascist hates more than Bernie Sanders, a Jew and a socialist, right? Rolled into one. He is the median voter. That's not true. He's probably way better read and educated than the median voter. Sounds like a One Nation Tory. I wouldn't know because I'm not British. I don't have that intimate of a knowledge of British politics. I don't know what the Tories have been getting up to lately, except for the fact that they've been going all in on the, like, saying Keir Starmer is white. Fuck that guy. He's pasty. Basically moderate Tories. Okay. Yeah, you know what? I could see that. I could see that. I guess, you know, look, failing better descriptions of him, I think I'm content to go with he is a liberal, basically. Like, he's approaching this with a very liberal view of politics. Good governance, the role of the state in providing stability for society and uplifting, in this case, what he views to be the in-group, but what will actually, like, end up uplifting all of society rather than focusing on purely what will denigrate and harm those he views to be lesser in society. They just elected the most insane person to ever step foot in British politics as their leader. Really? Who? I don't want to get sidetracked on that right now, but I have not seen that. I have not seen what all is going on there, so I can't comment too much on it. I think that was good decision making there. Oh yeah, Kemi Badenoch. That's right. No, I need to... Give me that boost panel. Yes. Okay. Ow! Damn it. Let's continue.
Things up, new things can arise. I thought that in 2016,
What's up, Peach?
2017, but at some point, you learn that Trump doesn't open up anything. Trump destroys things. Trump has closed off discussion of important ideas, including populist or nationalist ideas. He closes off discussion, and he has amplified idiocy. So
no, I got target shot.
When I really take it all in and I think about it, it's pretty easy. Is Kamala Harris my favorite candidate? Is she my ideal candidate? She's someone who I think, for better or for worse, goes with the flow. You know, there are many Kamala Harris.
Also, a correct assessment of Kamala Harris. You guys have heard me say on a couple of occasions that I believe Kamala Harris is more molded by convenience. She's much more of a party operative in that sense, that, like, specifically I mentioned this with respect to the discourse around Zionism. This must be the third or fourth race you got Mario Karted. Yeah, I'm over it. I've mentioned with respect to Zionism particularly as a topic of political debate that Joe Biden is a Zionist ideologically. He is ideologically motivated in his Zionism, whereas Kamala Harris is a Zionist also, but is only really that because of the structures around her being Zionist, and she sort of reflects that ideology as a matter of political convenience, expedience, and to a lesser extent pragmatism, right? Which is what he's saying here, that Kamala Harris's politics is largely like that of the institutions. Her politics will change with the institution.
Harris is out there. There is the Kamala Harris who was pretty woke, you know, to be fair, when she ran for president in 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, she was way better back then.
There's also the Kamala Harris that I see now, who understands where the party is, understands where the public is, and is, in effect, a center-right candidate. If you take her DNC
I
speech and you look
don't
at
think I disagree.
that could have been lifted, without changing a single word, that could have been lifted from a 2004 Republican convention speech. That's where she is. She goes with the flow, but...
Forgot he's still a right-winger?
Going?
Yeah, that's true.
In my mind, that flow is going.
Behold, the median voter that the Democrats have been campaigning to. We found him. The one fucking guy who is appealed to by the centrist rhetoric of the DNC. You know? He's just he's a right-wing, but very well-read, and in some cases, like, accidentally based liberal. Even though he identifies with the ideology of white supremacy in presumably still in some measure. You know, I don't know how much that's still true of him, given the takes that he's given in this video. How is Richard Spencer, of all people, this base? Again, I think it's just because he has adopted or is using a rational and more materialist framework to arrive at his political... conclusions here, right? Like, what he's maximizing for, presumably, is positive outcomes that benefit the white race, you know? Like, And to that effect, he's going to support a lot of policies that are based, because politics is not divided along racial lines, it's divided along class lines. If you do something to benefit a racial group of people and you want it to be a workable, policy that you can implement and whatnot, then it is inevitably also going to benefit other racial demographics of people. He has accidentally his way out of being a white supremacist and is now like a more rational, like liberal seeming type of person. At least in some respects. Again, it is quite a contradiction to behold, and I don't know how the psychology of that works. I need to call up a professional to give me a fucking master's thesis or like a dissertation on this man's thought process, because it is so singularly strange to me.
Going towards centrism, towards rational government, towards a sort of democratic hegemony, once again, is the natural party of government. Is this my ideal? No. But this is something that I can support, and it's something that I can responsibly support. So I'm happily voting for Kamala Harris, and I hope you'll take this under advisement and do the same. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.
Okay, and there we have it. I'll turn the React Andy off in, if I get the chance to do so. I don't know why I threw that backwards. Alright, let's get this box. Thank you. Mushroom? Okay. Let me hide that so you guys can't see it anymore. Much more clean UI. Okay. Alright. That was something. It actually it felt kind of uncomfortable in a way to find agreeable the arguments of somebody who otherwise, identifies as a white identitarian or white supremacist, right? It was kind of uncomfortable to be like, okay, that's a correct argument. That's a correct argument. As far as I know, he did not make any arguments from race that whole video. He was purely making arguments from who would bring more material stability and better policy outcomes, which we could assume stems from some interest in white people's lives getting better, which in America and other such Western countries would also translate to racial minorities' lives improving as well, because, again, that's not the lines along which politics is divided. Plot twist, he's just nuking himself to get out of the grift? I don't think it's a grift. And that's the strangest part. Fucking can't wait for the Richard Spencer Democratic ticket in, 8 years' time. What the fuck is going on, dude? I don't understand this. Every argument that he made throughout that video about Kamala Harris being the lesser of two evils, being a better steward of the state, and being more promising from a perspective of wanting stability both domestically and abroad, all of which would garner better material outcomes, these are all correct arguments and can all be made completely removed from a white supremacist view of the world. And that's why I say I think he's kind of accidentally his way out of white supremacy here. Rationality and a material lens of political analysis is fundamentally incompatible with fascism and white supremacy as ideologies, because as we have all mentioned and talked about, Fascism and white supremacy are not about the advancement of the in-group, rather they are about the suppression of the out-group for an abstract notion of the common good that never materializes in real life. This is consistent to every fascist movement in the world throughout all time, that fascism or reaction has existed in politics as a recognizable thing. But here we have somebody who is a professed white identitarian, and again, seems to only be putting the aesthetic of that over what is otherwise a lens of analysis and a political decision-making logic that leads him to be basically a liberal first and foremost, or a sort of I don't know, some kind of utilitarian. I don't really know. I don't know. I don't know. Democrats truly delivering on the promise of a big tent party by earning the endorsement of a white supremacist for being better stewards of the interests of the white race than the Republicans, who are incompetent buffoons that will only tear the white race down and destroy white civilization. That's the underlying logic there. I think this is going to be a segment on YouTube. I almost don't know how to end it, so I'll just say, go fucking hog wild in the comments. Like, this is such a interesting phenomenon. It does, in a way, it almost defies comprehension. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss for words at this point. Future me, cut that segment there. Like I said, YouTube comments go fucking nuts with this one. I'm open to explanations. That you know, from any which angle. Although in lieu of something better, I think I'm gonna stick with my, like, he's mostly just a liberal with a somewhat rational and material but consistent, like, analysis. Yeah, cut it there. Holy shit, dude. I think I need to take a beat. I'm gonna, you know what? Let's just go a race or two. Let's go a couple of races without, like... We need to take a second to move on from that. I gotta turn off the orb of confusion, and that might take a few minutes. The camera will remain in the top right, because I'm gonna do another React segment. Maybe they should start using that argument. That would be incredibly funny. I don't think it would be super practical, but it would be really funny to see Democrats in rural areas employing these sort of the sort of white supremacist arguments, but that lead rationally to the same conclusion, one way or the other. Although even in that instance, I don't think it would work terribly well, because like I said, fascism is an inherently irrational ideology. A lot of people out in the sticks, the propaganda that is sort of delivered to them, the news that they get, the framing that they are familiar with, only instills in them that logic of hurting migrants. It doesn't even name, like, the most difficult part about combating white supremacy in the modern day is that it almost doesn't even name white people anymore, right? Like, you couldn't really make arguments about the advancement of the white race in a way that would have that kind of appeal, because white supremacy doesn't mention white people all that much anymore. Not in its institutionally embedded form, right? Like, you go out to, like, you take a look at some of the more typical conservative arguments about migrants. Sure, they'll allude to those migrants being dirty and whatnot. But they don't explicitly say that it's about the white race. Does that make sense? Like, even Republicans, even the most fascist of Republicans would still be like, oh yeah, you know, obviously we condemn fascism and white supremacy, even though they themselves are fascist and white supremacists in many respects. It's a truly bizarre political phenomenon that I think it like, genuinely, it might not surprise me if we never see anything like Richard Spencer again. Yeah, they tone it down and they dog whistle because those like supremacist, the openly supremacist parts of that ideology, at least the you know, the not toned down, not dog whistled parts of it are not, at least not yet, palatable to the general public. You know? Yeah. That's exactly right. But like I've said in streams past, social progress is very hard to undermine once it is embedded in broader society. Because the Republicans and fascists are attempting to use the artifice of the state to begin a project of undermining social progress, it's going to be difficult for them. And it's possible that the destruction that they would wreak as a fascist, you know, government would be temporary, right? They are engaging in all of the propagandizing efforts that they believe to be necessary, and that I think everybody would believe are a necessary precondition of normalizing those sorts of attitudes so that they may be stated more openly, right? But I don't think that will ever truly materialize, you know? I'm gonna not get an item this time. Ow. What a world. What a world, guys. Watch us check back on Richard Spencer. God, how funny would it be? We check back on Richard Spencer in like fucking 4 to 5 more years' time, and he's like, just like, yeah, I believe in the advancement of the white race, which is why I believe that the proletariat of all races should band together and seize the means of production so that we may construct a white utopia, or some shit like that. Like, at this rate. Seriously, that's where the lens of analysis that he has leads. If he's thinking about pragmatic outcomes, he's inevitably going to stumble his way into something that resembles socialism. That's where all pragmatism, politically speaking, leads. You know, if he's orienting his worldview based off of outcomes, he's gonna find himself at that point eventually, even if his outcomes are meant for the white race primarily. You know? Like, oh, for example, the revitalization of unions in the United States is unambiguously good for the working class, right? Which is something that a lot of socialists like. You know, we can talk about the details of trade unions and how they technically only represent a mobilization of labor that is compatible with capitalism and thus must eventually be re-examined. But regardless, a socialist right now would support the revitalization of trade unions because they are a vessel through which workers can advance their interests, right? And that's good for the working class, i.e. good for broader society. Somebody like Richard Spencer would look at that same phenomenon and still come to the conclusion that this is good because it's good for the white working class and because it's good for broader white society. You know? Both would agree that trade unions are like good for different seemingly different reasons, but utilizing functionally the same logic of sort of, we want broader society to benefit and life to be better. In Richard Spencer's case, he's doing that for like, oh, I want life to be better for white people, but his version of that is not necessarily exclusive to life being better for non-white people also. You know? And that's the big rift between him and the other white supremacists, is that other white supremacists will fundamentally reject societal improvement if it at all means that non-white people also benefit from it. For them, if something is beneficial, it must only be beneficial to the white race. Otherwise, it's bad. And if something is detrimental to the white race, then it is acceptable as long as it is also detrimental to the inferior races, you know? I mean, I've just repeated what I've said, various times, but, like... What a goofy world we live in. Get blue shelled. Okay, at least I'm getting blue shelled before this corner. I can still do the sand hop. That's good. Yeah, look at that. I really need an item box, so I'm gonna get one here. I'm glad I didn't get hit by that bullet. Yeah, I did not expect him to be that consistently correct in his, like, political analysis and rationale for, like, okay, I'm voting for... Not just for Kamala Harris, mind you. The video was, here's why I'm voting for Kamala Harris. He laid out that he's voting for the Democratic ticket all the way down. Right? Again, he is the liberals' vision of what a white supremacist is, because liberals are, well, a little bit soy, a little bit goofy themselves, but, like, liberals a lot of times make the erroneous assumption that white supremacists are at a broad level, like Richard Spencer, in that they want positive outcomes for the white race, but fundamentally it's the opposite. They want negative outcomes for the inferior races. Again, heavy air quotes around all of these. The reason that's so interesting is because nobody else is like that. None of the other white supremacists think like that. And most of the other people who have a somewhat similar lens of political analysis are not white supremacists. Or, again, Richard Spencer is very, well known, I guess, for his usage of the term, like, white identitarian. Alright, after this race, I will get started on the next React segment that I had in mind for today, because somebody suggested it in the Discord channel, and I want to take a look at it, because it actually pertains, again, to like, American politics, the election, whatnot, from a lens as viewed from, like, the outside and stuff like that. Also, I feel like there might be something to be said about how crazy the races have been, as I'm, like, over here getting confused by Richard Spencer, Oh no, I didn't get an item. Well, I'm in first, so that's good. Oh, nice, no animation trick. Just what I wanted for my birthday. Okay, I'm through there. Oh, that was the perfect wall trick. You guys see that? Avoid blue shell any percent? Yeah, in incoming, probably. My lead might actually be big enough that I can tank a blue shell. Not that it matters, because I'm right at the end. Cool. Now we're going for me, this is actually a little bit like breakneck pace. Let's go start with the next one. Properties. Okay. So, a viewer, actually 1v3, suggested that I take a look at this video. Initially, I was worried about, like, copyright, but look right down here. NOS is a Dutch public broadcast service. Isn't that nice? So, I suppose, hopefully, I don't have to worry about copyright. And this is... I can't pronounce this, but it's Dutch for the American presidential election untangled. At least I think so. Here, let Google Translate help me out. Oh, okay, explained. I was close when I said untangled. So let's take a look. What is this guy going to say about American elections? How correct is he? And what are some of the... Yeah, I think it is interesting to take a look at an outsider's perspective of American elections, because like American electoral politics has very wide-ranging implications. That's why, you know, it's the meme about like, oh, America thinks it's the only country in the world. That's because anything that happens in America is relevant everywhere else, because America has that kind of geopolitical reach the world round. But actually, since it's YouTube, I will have my nice shortcut keys. So I think it's J and K, or like, I don't know. Yeah, okay, it's the K key. Are we looking forward to it? Americans can vote, but we are certainly watching. Yeah. True. They mainly think that themselves. Stop being so up your own ass. See, it's funny that people say like, oh, Americans think that it's the greatest country in the world. I mean, yeah, a lot of people think that, but I think a lot of people don't like the idea that like you're tied to America's fate. Like, the fate of the world is tied to the fate of America in a lot of respects because of how influential America is, how powerful it is, how wealthy it is. That's how geopolitics works. If it was another country that was the most powerful and wealthy country in the world, that's who we would be talking about. But right now, that's America. You know? Dang it. Alright, I'm just gonna... Oh no, I barely missed that target shot for first place. I waited too long. This is why I pay so much attention to what's going on over there. Yeah. Has a direct impact on my life too. Yeah.
Of gaan we met nieuw kid on the block, Kamala Harris, Brett de winter in.
We are not going back.
Eén ding is zeker in de Amerikaanse democratie. The
Winner takes it all.
Takes it all.
It's so weird listening to Dutch because they'll say random things that are exactly the same as in English. Like he says, the winner takes it all. That's also how you say that in Dutch. But yes, America does have a winner-take-all electoral system, which is also known as first past the post. This is why there are only two political parties in the United States, because in a first past the post system, any other parties will be like subsumed into or eclipsed by the main two options. There's a natural sort of political process that leads to first past the post systems only having two relevant political parties, you know? Because it would still be a two-party system. Only one party can win, which leads to it being kind of like a binary choice, if that makes sense. There's a whole, like, there's a very complicated, or I feel like there is a explanation that I'm not quite getting at that could probably do it more justice than I am right now. But the long and the short of it is that the sort of winner taking it all is inextricably linked to the two-party system. And in fact, it is the two-party system. And it's why third parties in America are only referred to as third parties and don't have much relevance beyond that. Anyways, mucho analysis for like 3 seconds of the guy talking, so let's get back to it.
11,780 votes.
This was the phone call after 2020. I'm dumb.
4 jaar geleden. In deze video leg ik je uit wat dat voor de komende verkiezingen betekent en hoe dat Amerikaanse winner-takes-all systeem überhaupt functioneert. Want het kent automatisch ook veel verliezers. Sowieso altijd ongeveer de helft, maar soms nog wel. Zo krom is de Amerikaanse democratie.
Okay, I want to get something out of the way real quick, that American democracy is not uniquely corrupt. There are some things that are, like, slightly more out there. For example, the concept of lobbying in America is way more permissive of the capital class using money to influence politics than most systems in Europe. But fundamentally, all of the flaws that come with American liberal democracy, you will also see in European liberal democracies, which includes the preference for the capital class, you know? Basically, be careful of sort of American diabolism by saying, like, oh, America is uniquely corrupt. No, it really isn't. What's left of it. It is true that
Please let me explain. Oké, alvast even een disclaimer. Niet dat wij hier nou zo perfect zijn, of andere democratieën wat dat betreft.
Okay, so he's acknowledging that liberal democracies in Europe also have flaws.
Evenredige vertegenwoordiging. Dus dat een percentage stemmen ook wordt vertaald naar een aantal zetels. Dat geldt niet voor zogeheten meerderheids.
Yeah, explaining the proportional representation model or the coalition model.
In deze context is Amerika een beetje een vreemde eend. Zelfs als dit normale verkiezingen zouden zijn. Maar dat zijn ze niet. Maar stel, alles gaat zoals zou moeten. Je zou zeggen dat, ook in een tweepartijenstelsel, elke stem in ieder geval evenveel waard is. En dat
Okay, he's gonna explain how your vote isn't worth much.
Amerikanen noemen dat de popular vote. Maar daar koop je in de VS.
Where's my internet died? Yeah.
Sterker nog, het is al een paar keer voorgekomen dat een kandidaat de popular vote verloor, maar het presidentschap won. 3 keer heel lang geleden.
Yes, that's right. The Electoral College. He's going to explain this probably in more depth, but I want to get ahead of the topic that I assume he's not probably going to bring this up. The only reason that the Electoral College exists is to benefit conservatives and the propertied class. That is the express reason that it was written into American law. As far as I know, the Electoral College isn't even written into the Constitution. The Constitution mentions electors, but the electors also could just mean the voters themselves, right? Like the people who vote for somebody who will then later be elected. Regardless, the Electoral College widely skews the weight that certain votes have, and it is basically a sort of training wheel. It is a crutch for conservatives and the propertied interests, so that the obviously more popular, like more progressive wing of politics is sort of like held at bay. But outside of that, I'm sure this guy's actually going to do a pretty good job of explaining the basic gist of the Electoral College. So let's get back to it.
Eén keer in het jaar 2000.
One of the most contentious elections in American history was
That's right.
finally settled.
Ja, daar was het.
Year 2000 was actually an example of Republicans being successful in stealing an election. The vote count was stopped before it could be finished in Florida as a product of top-down instigated right-wing riots. And as a result, the election was called for George Bush Jr., even though he not only didn't win the popular vote nationally, but it later came out that if the count had continued, he would have also lost the popular vote in the state of Florida, where this whole controversy happened. You know?
En veel recenter nog, 2016, Donald Trump.
Yes, that's true.
Stemmen minder dan Hillary Clinton, maar won wel.
So help me God. So help me God.
Yeah, as much as people might assume otherwise, but Donald Trump, despite having been the president of the United States, has never won the popular vote. Even fucking Hillary Clinton, who was the most terminally unlikable lich that the Democrats could have fished out of the bag of neoliberalism, got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump in 2016. But the popular vote isn't what determines who wins the office of the president.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Hoe dan? Komt door het unieke Amerikaanse
I so wish I was alive and old enough for the 2000 election. That was such a shit show. I mean, I was born in August 2000, so I also have no memory of it. It would have been very interesting to watch it unfold with the sort of cognizance that I have today. That much I fully agree.
systeem, waarbij de president niet direct door het volk wordt gekozen, maar via de 50 staten. Je stem telt daar alleen voor de staat waarin je woont.
Bro said 50.
Waar de meerderheid pakt, wint de hele staat. Dit wordt een beetje ingewikkeld, maar...
That's right. It's winner take all by state. So it's not the national popular vote that determines it, but the state popular vote, which determines the points that you get, basically. And then those points determine who becomes the president, with the exception of 2 states. There are 2 states that don't do this. Nebraska and Maine, they both have the, they both have, like, the points system. They each have, I think, 5 points. But for each of them, the points are decided by, like, precincts. So by percentages. So, like, in Nebraska, usually there are 4 points that go to Republicans because most people vote for Republicans in Nebraska. But enough people vote for Democrats in Nebraska in the presidential elections that there is actually a point that goes to the Democrats, usually, in the presidential election. And I think the other way around applies with Maine, where most of their points go to the Democrats, but then enough Republicans vote in Maine that the Republicans get 1 point from Maine. Those are the 2 exceptions to the winner-take-all rule, where there is some, proportional allocation of the electoral votes for the presidency. But for all the other states, for example, just take a state like Virginia, if more people vote for the Republican than the Democrat, even if it's 50% plus 1, all of the points go to that candidate. And the other votes literally don't matter. It's a pretty big problem in the electoral system, but again, it benefits the right wing and it benefits the property class, so it will never be fixed. Yeah, yay, first past the post. Great. Love my quote-unquote democracy. I'm dead.
Maar luister. Alle 50 staten hebben vertegenwoordigers in het congres. Hier, dit gebouw in de hoofdstad. Het Capitool.
Yes. Oh yeah, the representatives and such.
Op dat aantal is het zogeheten Electoral College gebaseerd. Het kiescollege. Dat college wijst uiteindelijk de nieuwe president aan. Door 538 electoral votes te verdelen. Hier een beetje gek vertaald naar kiesmannen. Maar zie het meer als een soort puntensysteem.
Oh.
Een president...
Guys, I promise I didn't pre-watch this. Points was just the easiest thing I could use to describe it and most comprehensible, so there you go.
De presidentskandidaat heeft dus een meerderheid van die 538 punten nodig. Oftewel, met 270 kiesmannen of meer ben je er.
270 to win the White House. Congress officially counts the votes after all 50 states have made their selections.
Hoeveel kiesmannen per staat? Daarvoor kijken we naar de 2 kamers in het
Ja.
congres. Het Huis van
This is another way in which the Electoral College benefits the right wing and the propertied interests, is because it inherently slants things towards the rural areas where there are less people. Every state, regardless of population, has 2 senators. Alaska has about 600,000 people and has 2 senators. California has about 40 million people and has 2 senators. Virginia has about 8 million people and has 2 senators. The representatives are based on the population. Alaska only has 1 representative, and California has, I think, 50-something.
Afgevaardigden en de Senaat. Alle 50 staten, groot of klein, hebben elk sowieso 2 senatoren. Die zijn dus ook 2 kiesmannen/punten waard. En hoeveel afgevaardigden een staat in het huis heeft, wordt bepaald door het aantal inwoners. Daar begint het al grondgelegd. Neem een reus als New York State. Met bijna
Don't copyright me.
mensen. Die krijgt 26 afgevaardigden.
Oh, he's about to explain what I just explained. Guys, I swear I didn't pre-watch this.
Terwijl een ukkie als Wyoming met maar weinig mensen er slechts eentje krijgt. Maar wel weer plus die 2 senatoren. Is dus 3 kiesmannen. Relatief veel meer per inwoner. 1 stem uit Wyoming is dus veel meer waard.
And again, this was by design.
Dus puur de staat waar je woont bepaalt hoe zwaar jouw stem weegt. En dat is een groot voordeel voor de kleintjes. Maar wacht, het kan krommer. Want voor heel veel Amerikanen geldt dat hun stem zelfs helemaal niets waard is.
Ja.
Omdat alle kiesmannen van 1 staat dus naar 1 kandidaat gaan. Voorbeeld. Californië, de staat met de meeste inwoners. Terug naar 2016. Trump tegen Clinton. Daar stemden bijna 4,5 miljoen mensen op Trump. Maar zij zagen hun stem verloren gaan doordat 2 keer zoveel mensen op Clinton stemden. En zij er dus vandoor met alle 55 kiesmannen uit.
Yeah, the conditions, put quite simply, the conditions under which your vote counts versus whether it doesn't. If you're in a conservative state and you vote conservative, your vote counts. If you're in a conservative state and vote liberal, your vote does not count. If you are in a swing state, your vote counts no matter what. Or your vote matters. Because it, like, a swing state, quote-unquote, has the potential to either favor the conservative candidate or the liberal candidate. But for the vast majority of people in the United States, their votes do not matter.
Staat Californië.
It's so sad.
Maar omgekeerd gold
It is
hetzelfde
pretty
voor
dumb.
grote staten als Texas en Florida. Daar zagen juist miljoenen democraten hun stem verdelen.
Yeah, look at that. And by the way, in Texas, oh, are they showing? I don't know if they're showing 2016, 2020. In 2020, Texas almost went to the Liberal Party. The Republicans, this group that's in power, had to purge 1 million or more people from this list. Imagine you add 1 million to this number, all of those points go to the other candidate because we don't have a fucking proportional system or whatever.
Dampen, met veel kleinere marges. Nog, hoppa, 67 kiesmannen voor Trump. Zo kon Trump dus winnen. Met dus miljoenen stemmen minder.
I did win more than 3 million votes than my opponent. So...
Maar wel veel meer kiesmannen.
God, I hate Hillary Clinton. Texas flipping would be fucking hilarious. That it would be. Texas, Blexus is almost real. It's very close to becoming real. I think in the next couple election cycles, we may see it materialize more and more. Yeah. Because Republican voter suppression is kind of, in a way, it's contingent on there being few enough people to suppress that they can sort of muster the administrative framework in order to do it. If Republicans start getting outmatched by Democrats by like a comfortable 60-40 or 55-45 margin, then Texas will go blue and there's actually nothing the Republicans can do about it. But that kind of assumes that they don't just take control and sort of eliminate the artifices of democracy entirely, which is precisely what we're grappling with right now. Is that, you know, we're sort of outlining these systems as they usually exist, but these are extraordinary circumstances in which these systems have been like undermined and sabotaged with little to no defense of them. Don't copyright me.
Is de komende verkiezingen niet anders, met Harris tegen Trump. Maar...
No, this is the worst spot to pull a bullet bill.
Meer dan 200 miljoen stemgerechtigde Amerikanen. Dat is bijna 9 op de 10 geldt dat ze deze verkiezingen eigenlijk... Gerechtigde Amerikanen. Dat is bijna 9 op de 10 geldt dat ze deze verkiezingen eigenlijk helemaal niet eens meedoen. Ook weer puur door de staat waarin ze wonen. Goed, ze mogen wel stemmen, maar...
You know what would be the funniest... What is that?
Dat de winnaar eigenlijk al zo goed als vaststaat. De zogeheten blauwe of rode staten, waar of Harris of Trump duidelijk populairder is. Zekerheidjes, dus. Maar voor veel stemmers in die typisch rode of blauwe...
If Texas and Florida went blue, but somewhere like Pennsylvania went red. That's not going to happen this election cycle, but god, it would be funny.
Staten voelen de verkiezingen een beetje als spek en bonen.
Oklahoma hasn't hosted a general election presidential candidate in, get this, 40 years.
En voor de kandidaten geldt dat die staten dus ook helemaal niet interessant zijn om campagne te voeren.
So this weighted system is why you always see stuff about Pennsylvania. Why foreigners might know certain states by name. Pennsylvania, Ohio, maybe less so now, but like certainly Pennsylvania and potentially a couple of the states in the Midwest in the Rust Belt, because that's the only states where running a campaign is like viable with such a system. I'm getting bumped as hell.
Voters, well, they feel forgotten.
People living in spectator states are also less likely to vote.
Spectator states, yep.
Dus ook niet op de issues die daar spelen.
This state is irrelevant.
Beetje kom, misschien. Dat doen ze wel volop in de staten waar het er echt nog om spant.
So campaigns tend to focus on states where a small shift can deliver all of its electoral votes.
The headline obviously continues to be it's very close everywhere.
In de zogeheten swing state.
Oh yeah, I don't know if you noticed from that brief clip of maybe it was CNN or it was either them or ABC that was like doing that election coverage. He showed it for like a brief second, but a lot of news outlets cover elections like they're a game. Do you think Georgia will stay blue? Hard to say. Like I said, there are some extraordinary circumstances this election because the Republicans have expressly promised to be more and more anti-democratic. I think if we see the kind of mobilization that we saw in 2020 in Georgia, I think Georgia will go to Kamala Harris. But again, that assumes that the votes are counted sort of normally. You know, where Republicans are already trying everything they can and will try once the election happens, to like discard the vote count, to discard the votes if possible, right? So it's like, it's difficult to say, you know? That was, oh yeah, it absolutely was. Blorgia was like the best meme that we got from 2020. Most likely, like one of the best memes from that election cycle. It fell so perfectly in that gap. God damn.
Hier kunnen de kwartjes, opgeteld 93 kiesmannen waard, alle kanten opvallen.
If either candidate wins any 5 of the 7 swing states, that's enough. That gets either one across the 270 electoral college vote finish line.
De 32 miljoen stemmen
in
deze 7 staten bepalen dus de koers van het hele land. En die andere meer dan 200 miljoen
That leaves most Americans on the sidelines.
kijken slechts toe. Maar kan nog komen. Dit systeem laat toe dat zelfs maar een paar duizend stemmen het verschil kunnen maken voor alle 333 miljoen Amerikanen.
Or in the case of Florida in 2000, a few hundred.
4 jaar geleden nog.
We can now project the winner of the presidential race.
My fellow Americans,
Let op.
we've won with the most votes in the history of the nation.
Biden versloeg Trump afgetekend in zowel de popular vote.
Yeah, but it was kind of crazy the margin by which Joe Biden won the popular vote and still only barely won the electoral vote. Right? Like the electoral vote count. Because the swing states went to Biden. Some swing states favored Biden by very small margins of like a few thousand or a few tens of thousands. Those were the votes that mattered. This 81 million number, if this were, say, 40,000 votes less, then Trump would have won the election getting 7 million fewer votes than Joe Biden. And yet Trump still received the most votes of any Republican ever. Oh yeah, participation in the 2020 election was an all-time high, actually because of coronavirus. Coronavirus basically made it so that going to the polls to vote, which had been the norm for most of American history, was no longer feasible, right? Yeah, going to the polls during COVID would be absolutely insane. So by necessity, states introduced mail-in voting, which they had been reluctant to earlier because, you know, Republicans don't want people voting. But it was sort of necessary for that to happen. You know, and so the mail-in voting, the capacity to now vote by a mail ballot, made it way, way easier for people to participate in the American election. So the turnout for the 2020 presidential election, but also the 2022 midterm elections, were much higher than comparable elections in years and decades past. 2022 had an abnormally high turnout rate for a midterm election, when most people aren't paying attention. That's when the president isn't up for election. You know? And that's because of how much easier voting was. Most of the voting structure and electoral structure in America is built to make voting difficult, because if voting is more difficult, conservatives will win more and the property interests will be better protected from the democratic aspirations of the masses.
6 votes. Donald J. Trump has received 232 votes.
Of ja, leuk. Op de kaart ook. Maar laten we eens inzoomen op...
You'd expect headline... Oh, yeah, you'd expect headline out of Belarus or somewhere. Candidate wins by losing by 7 million votes. Yeah. They got just enough votes in the right areas, you know? Because it's a weighted system. Oop, didn't do that.
Totaal 37 kiesmannen. Eerst Wisconsin. Hier was het verschil tussen Biden en Trump net iets meer dan 20.000 stemmen.
Just 20,000 votes.
Iets minder dan 12.000.
Less than 12,000 in Georgia.
Zelfs maar net iets meer dan 10.000. Opgeteld dus zo'n 43.000 stemmen verschil. Dat is niks. Of ja, heel weinig.
That's like one mid-sized city deciding the fate of an entire country. And the population of the United States, by the way, is about 340 million people. 340 million people live in the United States. And this is our election system, you know? It's been an urgent subject of political debate, or it's been a subject of political conversation of varying degrees of urgency, where most people agree that, yeah, the Electoral College is dumb, but ever since the fascist coalition sort of consolidated, right-wingers are much more comfortable just saying, yeah, land should vote and not people. Like, I've seen various versions of this argument on social media, where they'll post a image of America where most of the land is highlighted in red because nobody fucking lives there. And then the cities are small, dense pockets of blue, the colors of the respective parties.
That, my friends, is swing state math.
Het komt erop neer dat als iets meer dan de helft daarvan, slechts 0,008% van de Amerikaanse bevolking, anders zou hebben gestemd, het kwartje waarschijnlijk Trumps kant op zou zijn gevallen. Dat is een duur kwartje, want vandaar dus ook toen dat ene telefoontje van Trump naar Georgia voor slechts een paar duizend stemmen.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
Oops.
Nu snap ik het.
They're trying to rig an election.
You know, we joke about America being close to, like, resembling some electoral systems in, like, a tin pot dictatorship or whatever, like Belarus or Russia. But the truth of the matter is, I genuinely don't think America has the sauce for that. You know, like, the reason Trump had to go through all of the song and dance of trying to find a way to change the vote total by, like, annulling certain votes that were actually cast is a feature of this still being a liberal democracy. Like, they can't just make up a number like Assad or Putin or Lukashenko does, right? Like, they can't do that. They still have to operate in some way within the democratic system because people are so used to having, you know, elections that are more or less free and fair, where you can vote for the candidate that you, like, want to vote for, and, you know, you won't be, like, prosecuted for it or whatever. You know, like I said, it is part of that, like, social progress that's just very difficult to undermine at the end of the day. You know? Got him. Reminds me of what if all his Civil War masturbating, where he's like, oh, the Republicans will just stomp everywhere because they own most of the US. Yeah, genius, no one fucking lives there. Full of fields and wooden houses. Yeah, like, I think I've explained this, or I've touched upon this in another segment, but like, or last stream I touched upon this, but conventional civil wars just kind of don't happen anymore, you know? The name of the game is militia groups. And yeah, if anywhere, it would be the more conservative areas where militia groups are active. You know, crime statistics and terrorism statistics show us that. You know, less stable, much poorer, more conservative areas are host to more terrorist militias. But, you know, were a national divorce to happen, unless there was a Confederacy-style split, which, again, will not happen, that's all it would be.
Maar goed, Trumps poging om die stemmen te vinden mislukte. In alle rechtszaken maakte de rechter korte metten met zijn claims over verkiezingsfraude. Want er was nul bewijs.
Watch a bunch of rednecks go try to invade New York City or something. Yeah. What it is they want to be the rebels so bad while defending the fucking authoritarian structure of the state and of paterfamilias. Like that's it. That's why they like you'll find those same people that are all doomsday preppers being Mr. Back the Blue or whatever, right? They don't have, like, there's no sauce to it. They might go parading around in pickup trucks with guns and whatever, but they'd be a pretty ineffective militia. Which is not to say it wouldn't be scary for a lot of people. It would represent a significant destabilization of society, but, you know.
Republican or Democratic. En ook met geweld lukte het niet de uitslag te veranderen. Maar Trump houdt vol. Die verkiezingen zijn gestolen. Daar kom ik zo
Ja.
Eerst nog even dit.
Trump is still ran with that narrative, by the way. Even after he was laughed out of court, he still says this. And I honestly think at this point he does believe it, but that's of no consequence. Because the point is that, like, he is openly hostile to democracy. The Republican Party is openly hostile to democracy. And I think that, more than anything, is what's truly broken about American democracy. You know, this video is about the admittedly very broken subject that is the Electoral College and how it subverts democracy and subverts the popular vote and the popular, like, mandate and whatnot. But I think that the more realistic conversation that we have to have, or what topic is better to focus on, is that, like, the Republicans as a party have categorically rejected democracy, even insofar as it exists under the Electoral College. Like, for them, the Electoral College doesn't even go far enough. You have two parties, one of them is fascist, the other one isn't willing to remove the fascists from democracy in order to preserve the very fragile legs on which a liberal democracy stands. Yeah, I'd be dictator for one day. That is more pressing of an issue than the Electoral College right now. But, you know, the Electoral College would gain some pretty significant headway for the left if it were to be abolished.
Bepalende staten of slechts een paar duizend stemmen. Wat als ik zeg dat dit systeem het zelfs toelaat dat maar één staat of zelfs één stem het verschil kan maken? For real. We gaan even terug naar het jaar 2000.
Oh, he's going to talk about 2000.
George W. Bush. Ook in dat jaar moest de winnaar van de popular vote, Al Gore, het afleggen.
Holy shit, I didn't know the popular vote margin was that pronounced in the year 2000. Let me look this up. Wikipedia, what do you got for me? Oh, okay. No, it was not. So he's okay. Those are the Joe Biden versus Donald Trump election numbers. The popular vote margin in 2000 was much closer. Al Gore won just under 51 million. Got just under 51 million votes, and George Bush got 50.4 million votes. It was about a 500,000 vote difference between them at a national level. So it was a much closer margin than most other elections. See, this is not the actual numbers that these guys
In the end, though, Gore did get
pulled.
more popular votes nationwide. He lost the Electoral College, the first candidate to do this since Grover Cleveland in 1888.
En dit was bizar.
Election Day, the day to choose a new president for a new century.
Nog nooit waren de verkiezingen zo spannend. Met een intense verkiezingsnacht.
Election night that seemed to go on forever.
Uitslagen per staat druppelen binnen.
And this was also
het andere moment Bush.
This was also when they had to count all of the votes in one day. All of the paper ballots. One day. So, drafting. There we go. And this straight away, I will resume.
Eindelijk komt alles aan op wie de staat Florida.
Okay, yeah, he's talking about Florida, which is what I mentioned earlier.
Al Gore heeft een voorsprong en is er bijna, maar niet helemaal. Bush heeft nog 24 kiesmannen nodig.
Ow.
Florida,
Well, this remix slaps. This remix is great. I have it actually on my desktops, part of my playlist.
Die avond nog geen uitslag, want het ligt gruwelijk dicht bij elkaar.
After a long night of swing votes, the presidential race is frankly still too close to call.
Uiteindelijk zou Bush na zo'n 6 miljoen uitgebrachte stemmen 537 stemmen meer hebben dan Al Gore. Dat is 0,009% van...
Yep. George Bush won the state of Florida by just 537 votes, and that was only because his brother, who was the governor at the time, I believe, ordered the count to be stopped, and because the Republican Party organized a fucking riot in the state in order to make that count of votes stop.
Van het aantal stemmen in één staat. Of nog beter gezegd, dat is minder dan 0,002%
Mario Karted.
van de Amerikaanse bevolking. Maar die marge is zo klein
that there will be an automatic recount.
Elke stem wordt omgedraaid. 5A11 is a vote for Gore. Met rechtszaken over hoe en tot wanneer.
The legal challenges began immediately.
Maar het is super ingewikkeld door verschillende stemmethodes. Met biljetten per computer, een geperforeerd gaatje te veel of te weinig.
Florida's punchcard ballots that became the center of the controversy. The image of a judge inspecting one with a magnifying glass appeared to be on infinite loop.
Tienduizenden stemmen zouden zo ongeldig zijn verklaard.
Oh yeah, there was a truly Byzantine system of counting which votes were valid and which ones weren't. Because you had to punch a hole. And if the hole punch didn't go through completely, it was like invalid. So that annulled a lot of votes.
Van een paar honderd. Deze hele soap duurt 3 weken.
This went all the way to the Supreme Court. The fucking high priests of law. And most of them were conservative back then, too.
De US Supreme Court, het Amerikaanse Hoge Rechtshof, de hoogste rechters in de VS, een knoop doorhakken.
Who are appointed for life by whoever is the sitting president at the time of the appointment.
Dit uiteindelijk dat het hertellen van de stemmen geen uitsluitsel kon geven. Case dismissed. Gore neemt zijn verlies.
It's kind of crazy how he just glosses over that. Honestly. The election in 2000 was decided basically by the partisan inclinations of the government of Florida and the Supreme Court deciding that these votes are invalid. And as a result, George Bush not only loses the popular vote, but also would have lost the Electoral College vote. And the election gets called for him. Goofy-ass institution.
Strength of our democracy. I offer my concession.
And Bush wordt president.
We both gave it our all. The presidency is more than an honor. Thank you very much, and God bless America.
Een paar honderd stemmen dus maar. Die de koers van een heel...
I have not gotten an item this race yet.
Voor een deel ook de wereld. Of nog kommer, gezien het feit dat de Supreme Court uit 9 federale rechters...
Oh, okay, he's gonna talk a little bit about this.
4 was in het voordeel van Bush.
The 5-4 opinion to George W. Bush over Al Gore.
Eigenlijk maar...
That's true. One vote by the high priests of law.
Tja, dat kan met... Dat vinden wij hier misschien een beetje krom. Maar dat vindt een meerderheid van Amerikanen zelf ook. Bijna 6 op de 10 heeft...
That's true, I mentioned that earlier.
...vote als bepalende factor. Ja, dat getal wil je wel even uitsplitsen. Vooral de democraten willen dat. De meeste republikeinen vinden dat Electoral College chill. Niet zo gek, want het werkt enorm in hun voordeel. Bij de laatste 8 presidentsverkiezingen wonnen de republikeinen slechts 1 keer de popular vote. Dat was de herverkiezing van Bush in 2004. Maar door dat hele winner takes all principe met al die kiesmannen wonnen ze wel 3 keer een presidentschap. Weet je nog?
In the past several decades, I think since Bush Sr. in 1988, the Republican candidate has only won the popular vote once, and that was George Bush in 2004. All the other times, the Democratic candidate has won the popular vote.
I did win more than 3 million votes.
So help me God.
Doordat de Democraten veel vaker de meeste stemmen halen, zijn de Republikeinen veel handiger geworden om toch verkiezingen te kunnen winnen.
Yep, because the system favors them.
Denk aan zoiets als voter suppression.
Oh, he's going to talk about voter suppression.
Moeilijker maken om te kunnen stemmen voor bepaalde mensen. Dat zie je heel veel in de swing states.
Georgia passed a bill limiting time for absentee ballots and adding new voter ID requirements and making it illegal to give food or water to voters waiting in line.
That shit was insane, by the way. You're not allowed to give food or water to people in line. Like, just suffer. We just want to introduce more suffering to the process of voting and casting your ballot so that less people are able to do it.
Make sure everybody's registered and that people vote.
Of, veel belangrijker nog, de beproefde tactiek van gerrymandering. Kiesrecht, geografie.
Oh, suffrage geography, they call it.
Door de grenzen van verschillende kiesdistricten in een staat
zo
te tekenen dat bepaalde
very weirdly shaped districts can, like...
een kluitje worden gegooid, dat heet packing, of juist uit elkaar worden getrokken, cracking. Waardoor je met in totaal minder stemmen toch in al die districten een meerderheid kunt halen.
Yep. And both parties do this, but let's be clear, the Republicans are way fucking worse.
Lots of districts have very suspicious-looking shapes. The process of manipulating maps for political gain became known as gerrymandering. And then everyone
U.S. districts are nutty, yeah.
Gerrymandering is when politicians manipulate those voting districts.
They legitimately look like feudal fiefdoms.
Our democracy was designed so that voters could choose their politicians, not so politicians could choose their voters.
No, Tulsi Gabbard, maybe he doesn't know. Tulsi Gabbard's one of the biggest fucking grifters in American politics. She was previously a Democratic, I believe, senator from the state of Hawaii. But she, like, more so than anything, she, like, fucking hates Muslims. And that was an excuse for her to, like, jump down the far-right pipeline, and now she's just a Republican. I think she even endorsed Trump for president and such as well. You know? Look like principalities and bishoprics in the HRE? Yeah, and in fact, that's, like... It's a pretty good analogy to draw, I think, because it speaks to the separation of the state and people in any liberal democracy, really. But, like, it's especially blatant in the United States, You know, again, it's like it's a degrees thing. It's not like there are not some very bizarre constituency systems in Europe as well. Poland and Britain are actually known for having elements of this in their electoral system as well. But it's like the US kind of cranked it up to 11. And the main reason that all of these voter suppression measures were introduced is just because conservatives don't want black people to be able to vote. You know? And that's why a lot of these measures are like targeted to affect people who would have much lower incomes. There's a big overlap there. Almost. Yay, I win. I don't think I'm going to make this a segment, by the way. This video is like a little bit too agreeable for me to make some good content out of. It's not content-pilled enough. Yeah, Blue Shell to the rescue. So true.
Republicans will take control of the Senate. Zo zetten ze beleid naar hun hand en weten belangrijke poppetjes op belangrijke plekken te benoemen. Tot de Supreme Court aan toe. Weet je nog? Die 9 federale rechters.
Yep.
Die worden voorgedragen door de president en benoemd door de Senaat.
Yep.
Op dit moment zijn 6 van die 9 rechters door de Republikeinen aangewezen. En maar liefst 3 door Trump zelf, tijdens zijn eerste presidentstermijn.
The scam will be before the United States Supreme Court.
Het zal erop aankomen.
Yeah, the Supreme Court is one of the most thoroughly captured institutions by fascists in America because it was so conservative inherently to begin with. Think about it. Fucking 9, single digit, unelected high priests of law who are, like, immune from any legal consequences. Seriously, there are no ethical guardrails for the Supreme Court. Who can only be held accountable by themselves and are appointed by whichever president is sitting in power, serve for life, 6 of whom were appointed by conservative presidents. Like, great. Epic democracy that we have here. Legitimately, there are better systems of judicial decision-making that exist just in the United States. There are a number of areas where judges are elected, and I think that's a much more preferable model to having judges that are appointed. You know, especially for life, you know, election for a term of like 10 years or 6 years or whatever is so much more preferable than being appointed for life. And the federal circuit courts already exist at a federal level. It would be just as easy to say that their discourse would apply nationally and stuff like that. And a lot of people would invoke, well, you need to have a Supreme Court, otherwise laws ping-pong around, as if laws don't already ping-pong around routinely. The fucking mistake that people make in assuming that a Supreme Court is necessary is the other starting assumption that there must be some immutable dictation of what is the law. The law changes. The only argument for the Supreme Court is that the law should be final, which it never has been and never will be, nor should it ever be. It's an inherently authoritarian institution that compounds on a lot of problems. It's bad. It's really bad. In fact, I would even argue that such a system, the Supreme Court, is like the Supreme Court both passed and repealed the Roe versus Wade decision. You know, 50 years apart, but, like, even still. You know, the Supreme Court, honestly, is one of those institutions that is so vestigial to the functioning of society right now that you could honestly abolish it without even doing anything else or replace it, or, like, replacing it with anything, and shit would be fine.
Goed, de Republikeinen zijn dus beter in dit spelletje. Afhankelijk van je politieke kleur spelen ze het viezer of slimmer. Wat de Democraten daaraan doen? Nou, eerst was het motto:
When they go low, we go high.
Bullshit ass political slogan. This is what has lost Dems so much fucking ground to the Republicans, both ideologically and electorally.
Maar Er klinken ook andere geluiden. Er is zelfs een heel manifest met letterlijk de titel Tijd om met smerig te spelen. Met ook allemaal trucjes.
I believe that our party must be a party that fights fire with fire.
It's time for us as Democrats to be as tough as they are.
Oh, hey, I know that guy, I think. Maybe. No, wait, okay.
To be as dedicated
That's
as
Eric
they are,
Holder,
to be
never
as
mind.
committed as they are.
When they go low, we hit harder.
When they go low, we kick them.
Nee, het wordt er allemaal niet gezellig op. De Amerikaanse politiek is compleet gepolariseerd. Daar heb ik trouwens ook al een video.
American politics is completely polarized. That is true, but I do also feel like there's a risk of framing this as something unique to America. Politics is also very polarized in various other countries, and that's because of a predictable historical pattern of liberalism entering crisis, etc., etc. You know, when society or economics is at a point of crisis, politics becomes very polarized, and this is true of every country out there, really, you know? But yes, it does also apply to America, where, like, you know, you have fascists and then you have not fascists, some of whom are liberals, some of whom, very small percentage of whom are socialists. Look how many families permanently drifted apart over shit like Brexit. Yeah, and you know what? This might be a controversial take to some. I think that's deserved, and I think that's for the better. Because conservatives deserve to be ostracized when they retreat and regress into fascism. Fascism as a supremacist ideology inherently bases itself off of the disdain and hatred for others merely by virtue of existing. If that isn't grounds to cut off friends or family for being toxic, I don't know what is. You know? So yeah, you know, people lost friends and family over Brexit, presumably because they were so stupid and fascistic and spiteful that they deserve to be cut out of other people's lives. And it's sad for everybody, but, you know, yeah. Because ultimately Brexit was just about, like, a rising anti-immigrant sentiment in the UK. Which, I mean, anti-immigrant sentiment is very prominent everywhere right now, but that, you know, that was one of the marking points of it in the UK, kind of like the election of Trump in the US and Marine Le Pen having some pretty close runs with Macron in France a couple of times. You know, I think we all know the drill by this point.
Hoe dat kan leiden tot geweld. Zo zagen we 4 jaar
geleden. It's time for us as Democrats to be as tough as they are.
What?
To be
What's
as
going on?
De Amerikaanse politiek is 4 jaar geleden de ongekende geweldsuitbarsting.
Storming the Capitol, ja.
Het Capitool. En deze campagne nog de mislukte moordaanslag op Trump.
By the way, this was another fascist that did this. This was the guy that shot Trump, registered Republican.
En dan zijn we bij het nu. Trump houdt vol dat hij 4 jaar geleden is bestolen.
The message was mostly the same with the former president about the 2020 election.
That was a rigged election.
En hij heeft 4 jaar de tijd gehad om de hele Republikeinse partij naar
4 years to bend the entire Republican Party to his will. I think it's more accurate to say that Trump enabled the Republican Party to become fascist in a more all-consuming way, if that makes sense. Because the Republican Party has already grown past Trump. You can see the kind of rhetoric they use where now it's Trump having to follow the Republican Party in some ways in order to remain relevant within their ranks. To that effect, he still has a very significant hold over them. That's for sure. But, like, once Trump is gone, the Republican Party really has plans, and we need to be worried about that. You know? If anything, them bringing J.D. Vance into the picture, a like, terminally online Nazi type, who's just, like, a puppet in a suit, is indicative of how they have moved past Trump. They're like, yeah, Trump is the face, but what we really want is to put all these migrants in detention camps. Trump is genuinely pretty damn racist, but there's, like, a lot of stuff, because Trump is a grifter, I don't think he really cares about a lot of that. You know, he's actually not as insane as most of the Republican Party. Yeah, he's an old figurehead that everybody recognizes, and his time is limited in politics. Like I've said in at other points, I think this is probably going to be the last election that we see Trump running in. You know, at least that the Republican Party will abide by. You know, because he's just not going to have the sauce in the future.
En tegenstanders eruit te werken.
Liz Cheney.
The Republicans in Congress today have been co-opted, sort of a sleepwalking into dictatorship.
Oh, I thought it was the last lap, but I was not.
Ook al is er nul bewijs voor, 7 op de 10 Republikeinen geloven Trump dat de verkiezingen van 2020 zijn gestolen. Tijdens de midterms.
In 2028, I think he'll be in a care home, to be honest. I think he might be dead by 2028. Also, Liz Cheney fills me with hate because she's fucking... The only reason that she is politically relevant is because she's an anti-Trump Republican who literally agrees with Trump on everything, but thinks he's mean. And she's also, like, fucking... she's known for being the daughter of Dick Cheney, who perpetrated some of the worst war crimes that America has been, like, responsible for in the 21st century. The name Cheney is synonymous with war crimes. What is your opinion on Republicans for Harris? I think if it's somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger, then good. Cool. But ultimately, I've said before, and I will say again, that this is not about appealing to disaffected Republicans. This is about appealing to the left. You know, the Democrats are the comparatively more left-wing party, so they need to be mobilizing the less motivated sections of their own base. And anybody who doesn't like Trump is going to fall wherever they fall. Expending effort to make yourself look more like the Republicans in order to make yourself palatable to the Republicans will never work, has never worked, and moreover, we don't want it to work, because then you just have two fascist parties, one of which is slightly less fascist, you know? And when there's a competition in who is better at being Hitler, the Republican Party is always going to be better at being Hitler because they're more ideologically aligned to that effect. You know? The Democrats are playing the wrong game. They're fighting on the wrong terms, you know? But I think it's good when people vote for Kamala Harris, you know? Let the disaffected Republicans do the campaigning to other Republicans. The Democratic campaign is for the Democratic base. Rally the troops. Try to get as much support as possible. Because I guarantee you, with the cult of personality that exists around Donald Trump, there are way, way more people that would be able to be moved from the couch to Kamala Harris, as it were, than could be moved from Donald Trump to anywhere else. You know? People who support the Democratic Party or who are critical of Trump are not a cult of personality. Trump's base of support is. So it is useless to try to appeal to anybody even resembling that base of support. You have to appeal to the people that aren't a cult of personality, which means left independence.
In alle lagen van het stemproces en op niet onbelangrijke plekken.
That's true, my game committed
seppuku. Terecht te komen, die er alles aan zullen doen om een eventueel verlies.
Yeah, fuck them. Yeah, like we saw this with Labour in the UK. Labour made themselves more conservative and it lost them ground. Like, I remember seeing the news updates because of like all the goofy shit that the Tories were getting up to, and like Labour had an explosion of popularity, and then every announcement they made, every promise they walked back, they lost and lost and lost and lost support, to the point that now they actually have less popular support than the Tories again in polling data. You know, they've formed a government, but the next election, because the Labour Party has just made themselves into the Tory party, but like less, they're gonna lose the election. Yeah, because like for people who are trying to decide whether to vote for like Labour or Tories, it just comes off as weak and dishonest. Why wouldn't you just vote for the Tories, since obviously they're so great that the Labour Party is trying to make itself look exactly like them? We have a decent budget now, but we're fucked in 2029. Buddy, it is not going to take until 2029. I've seen the kind of like brutal austerity measures that have been proposed as part of this budget, like making housing less affordable. Like, shit is only going to get worse in the United Kingdom. You know?
Van Trump bij de komende verkiezingen aan te vechten. 2 jaar geleden een hele video aangeweid. Die zou ik zeker even kijken.
Okay, this is the part where he does some channel plugs. Yeah, I don't think I can really make a segment out of that. The video ultimately don't take this the wrong way. Like, I don't know, but like, there's some good stuff in there. I have no doubt that there is, but it's ultimately a liberal platform, which is the origin point of this crisis in the first place. If they don't commit completely to getting rid of austerity politics, then the crisis will only persist. And it's clear that the Labour Party is more willing to retreat into austerity politics than to be critical of and relieve it. Because they're all on the, reduce government spending. Motherfucker, government spending is how you get out of the austerity crisis. The austerity crisis was created by a lack of social infrastructure and money flowing into and out of these communities. Inheritance tax being extended to farms worth... Yeah, that's true. The tax increase, the tax hikes are good. But, you know, it's like... Yeah, temporary win. Anyways. Yeah, I actually think I'm probably only going to make a segment out of that Richard Spencer bit. Because the other video, what I initially thought was it was going to be like... I thought there was going to be more to comment on about the foreign perspective in American elections. I thought it would actually be more of a perspective, if that makes sense, rather than just a sort of explainer for what the Electoral College is and the American voting system and whatnot, you know? You know, disagreeable stuff makes for good content, but I think that video was pretty agreeable. I agree with a lot of the stuff said there, you know, the general sentiment that they held. So I don't think I'm going to make it a segment, because that stuff doesn't usually get too much attention. Hey, I was here a few months ago. Hey, Dankley, welcome back. Base video. Yeah, it legitimately, it's one of those things that's like, it's actually kind of too base for me to make content out of, because most of it is just going to be me agreeing with it and repeating stuff in the video. I don't want a content steal, and I don't want to not be original, you know? Like, and frankly, I think that watching the Richard Spencer video where this neo-Nazi comes out and says, by the way, I'm voting for Kamala Harris and straight down the Democratic ticket because they're better for the white race than the Republicans are. I think that, like, us freaking out at that is way better content, you know? But yeah. I'm gonna do one more race. Those were the only two things I really had lined up for today that I really thought like, I want to stream. If only for these two things, I want to stream today. And so I did what I set out to do. I'll do one more race, and then I will probably raid somebody and log off, still with the confusion in my brain that Richard Spencer has inspired. You know, great. Thank you, Richard Spencer. Very cool, I think. Didn't they just play this one? Oh, okay. Oh, well. Anyways, now I get to focus more on the race, so I'm going to I'm gonna get first easy money. Not really. I fully expect to get Mario Karted. Guys on a cart? Let's fucking go. Based. Ah, I'm getting bumped. I swear if this is another race where I like can't get an item for most of it, it'd be very annoying. Still don't have an item. You know there's going to be a referendum on Puerto Rican independence on November 5th as well. I did not know that. I think that... me personally, I think it would be better for the material circumstances of Puerto Rico for them to be a U.S. state rather than them being independent. But ultimately, I you know, think that even them being independent would probably be in a way preferable to them being a U.S. territory, right? And whatever happens, like, you know, it's good that that's a subject of discussion again, because being a U.S. territory means you don't have much of a say. Guessing the referendum isn't going to be legally binding. Most likely that'll be the case. And even if it is legally binding, I think a lot of Puerto Ricans would probably vote no. I think a lot of them would probably... A lot of people might vote no on it. Yeah, non-binding. Okay, so that's not of much consequence. If only we got a legally binding referendum on Puerto Rican statehood, that'd be nice. We want to do that. But again, that would mean more people would vote for the Democrats, and the country might inch to the left a little bit. So Republicans and Democrats both don't want that, because Democrats want to lose, and Republicans also want Democrats to lose. Which is a shorthand for much more complicated things that would take like 30 minutes to explain. Damn, that guy's way up there. Holy shit. Okay, I got no chance of getting first here, but I can get second, potentially. Maybe. Depends on what kind of item I got. Okay. No. Get me on the boost panel? Yes. Okay. There are 3 options. Independence with free association, statehood with the union, and full independence. Ah, okay. So then, yeah. I assume most people will actually probably pick statehood. And to me, that seems like the right choice just because, again, the best outcomes. I think independence would be more of a bumpy road. But again, like, maintaining the status quo isn't an option. That's good. Now, if only such a referendum were legally binding, that would be nice. I think that would be good, I think. Ugh. The formalities of democracy, ladies and gentlemen. I'm reading the math psychology of fascism, and they talk a lot about the formalities of democracy, like having the grandiose votes and stuff is not like really what makes a democracy, because you can't really do democracy from the top down, and this makes it especially evident because when you have a referendum that's sort of pitched from the top down by a stately authority, they could just say this isn't legally binding, by the way. It's like, oh, okay, so you're just letting us play pretend democracy, basically, Anywho, this has been tiring. This has been mostly because of the Richard Spencer bit, where for some reason one of the most famous white supremacists in America has decided to endorse Kamala Harris and like vote Democratic down ballot as well. It's a democracy playset, ages 5 and up. True. Ages 18 and up. Why? Why with the Richard Spencer thing? I explained it a lot when I was talking about when I was reviewing the video proper, so it'll be on YouTube. But the short version is I honestly think that Richard Spencer is motivated by a rational desire to advance the white race materially, which is something that is like alien to white supremacist and fascist ideology, because fascist ideology is based off of insecurity and the desire for suffering. Fascists don't care about the success of the in-group. They only care about the suffering of the out-group. In this way, Richard Spencer kind of defies all, like, white supremacist ideologies and preconceptions. It's one of the things that leads me to say I don't know how much of a white supremacist he even really is anymore in practice, because he's reaching a lot of conclusions that a typical liberal would conclude about good governance, about stability and economic efficiency and like income and whatnot, Like I use the example of like, picture a socialist who's in favor of trade unions because it benefits the working class, at least insofar as such a thing is possible in a capitalist system. Richard Spencer would approach that same issue and be like, yes, I like trade unions because they benefit the white working class, It is incredibly strange. But anyways, that's an entire rabbit hole that I don't want to immediately get sucked back into at the very end of stream. So I'm going to raid Cody Schwab, as I usually do. He's playing Rivals of Ether 2, I think. Yeah. And then there's a watch party of a tournament. So have fun. Richard Spencer gives leftist brain aneurysm live on air. That'd be a good title for the segment. Or something like that. Alright, I'll see you guys. I will see you probably on Election Day. I plan to do like a really long stream on Election Day.
Any Street Fighter. When I played a little